Welcome to another tech video you didn't know you needed. Today we'll be taking an in-depth look at the LG Gram Pro 17-inch with the Intel Core Ultra 7 155H with Intel Arc graphics. I haven't seen many reviews on this laptop, so I'm going to try and cover everything in this video. We'll open it up and upgrade the SSD, show the BIOS including the hidden advanced settings, do some comparisons with a M2 MacBook Air, look at weight, battery life, detailed power consumption, and performance across a variety of benchmarks, workloads, and a large assortment of games, even though this isn't a gaming laptop. I will also go over some setup tips and give you some of my thoughts and exactly who this laptop is for, since it isn't exactly cheap. It is a rather niche device, but if it fits your needs, there really is nothing else quite like it on the market. There will be a detailed index in the description so you can jump to the section you are interested in. Included in the box is a 65-watt USB-C power delivery charger and a USB-C cable. Here are the specs. The Intel 155H has a total of 16 cores, which breaks down to 6 performance cores, 8 efficient cores, and 2 lower power efficient cores. Intel Arc integrated graphics has 8 X cores, all with a base total TDP of only 28 watts. My version came with 32 gigabytes of 7500 MHz of LPDDR5, Wi-Fi 6E, and Bluetooth 5.3. 2 times USB 4 Thunderbolt 4 power delivery ports, that's 40 gigabits per second. So you've got a eGPU possibilities if you want to go that route, and full-size HDMI on the left. You've got 2 times USB-A 3.0 10 gigabits per second on the right, along with a headphone jack. There are no ports on the back. The weight is only 2.86 pounds. The dimensions are 14.9 inches across, 10.4 inches deep, and it's only a half-inch thick. It feels incredibly light to pick up, especially for a 17-inch laptop. So I pre-ordered this laptop back on May 31st, 2024, before this laptop even came out. I paid $1,900, plus I got a free ultra-wide 34-inch monitor directly from LG's website. So at the time, that was the best deal I could find, and at that price point, I felt it was a bit overpriced for what you got, but I had a very specific need for this laptop, and I've been using it pretty much every day since, so honestly, I have no regrets getting it, but I do feel it's overpriced for what you get, for the amount of power and compute you get out of it. Please note Costco does have it today for $1,200. It's a very similar laptop, but it is different. The panel is only 60 Hz and it is touchscreen. The physical aspects of the laptop is the key feature of what I think makes the LG Gram line of laptops truly unique. To give you a better idea of what I mean, I've compared it to a MacBook Air 13-inch M2 and also a Lenovo Legion 5 Pro 2021 16-inch. The Gram weighs 2.13 pounds at 17 inches, which is nearly the same as the MacBook Air, which weighs 2.11 pounds at 13 inches. In comparison, my Legion gaming/work laptop weighs 5.12 pounds at 16 inches. This thing is kind of an engineering marvel, though compromises had to be made to get this screen size and weight, especially in thermals and materials used. As far as materials, the first thing you'll notice, it feels kind of like cheap plastic, but it really isn't. It's made out of a magnesium alloy, so it is very tough as far as materials go. It is metal, but to get it this thin and light, they had to use a magnesium alloy. So it doesn't have that premium feel like a MacBook does or aluminum does, but they had to make compromises. To get it that thin also, there's definitely some flex on the back too, so it also gives it a more cheap feel. It doesn't feel quite as premium, but I'm willing to have that trade-off to get it so light. So let's go over a few features about this laptop. First, we have Windows Hello that uses the camera for facial recognition, and that works pretty well. As you can see, it just logged in, and it usually works pretty quickly and pretty accurately most of the time. It also has a backlit keyboard. It's just white, it's not RGB, but that is it's nice and is functional, so I like that. As far as keyboard flex, there is definitely some flex, as you'll see. It doesn't bother me at all when I'm typing, so even though you'll see a little bit of flex as I press on it, as I'm typing, it doesn't really bother me at all. I mean, compared to my Legion, it definitely doesn't flex at all. I mean, this thing's built like a tank, but also weighs like a tank. But
Even though there's a little bit of keyboard flex here, it doesn't affect typing at all. As far as keyboard layout, it's quite good. The spacing is really good. Of course, this is a 17-inch laptop, so I expect that. So one thing I like about this keyboard is the trackpad is nice and centered. Even though there's a numeric 10 keypad on the right, I still find this much more comfortable to type on. I find the letters more centered and overall the spacing much better. Mainly because this is a 17-inch laptop, so you just have more space to work with, I think. And so for the most part, I don't find myself striking the numpad as much when I'm hitting backspace as compared to the Lenovo Legion, where I find myself hitting the numpad quite often when I'm reaching for the backspace. I think everything's just shifted too far to the left, the way this is kind of orientated, and it kind of bothers me quite a bit.
Here's a quick speaker test, very unscientific. I'm just going to hold up a mic. I'm going to do it at 50% and then at 100%. So just a quick warning, it might get very loud here very shortly. So I really like this display. For an IPS display, I think it's excellent. It's super bright. It's 1600p. It is VRR. It has a frequency range of 31 hertz to 144 hertz, so it will sync up anywhere between that. I think it's great.
It's also a matte screen display, as you can tell. It diffuses reflections pretty well. Here's a quick test of the webcam. So here are the basic BIOS settings. There's not really a whole lot to see. Here's some system information. Over on Advanced, the main thing to note is the PCIe resizable bar support. By default, it is off. I enable it here. The main thing you want to note is that if you're going to do eGPU, you might want to turn this on. But other than that, I don't think it really has any impact on the integrated graphics. Here's some TPM settings.
One thing I noticed, there isn't a dedicated VRAM setting here in the BIOS like you see on a lot of AMD APUs like the Steam Deck or Asus ROG Ally. I believe on Intel Arc integrated graphics here, it's just fully dynamic, so there is no specific setting for that.
Now, in addition to this basic BIOS screen settings, there is also an advanced BIOS screen that you can get to. Now, you can really jack up your machine and potentially brick it. So just go in there and exercise extreme caution. I'm not going to really change anything in there, but I just want to show you the settings if you're curious. So just please, I'm not responsible for you bricking your machine. So just go in there with extreme caution. So the way you enter that is once you're on the basic BIOS screen, you want to hold these keys in succession. So keep holding the previous key as you add the key. So hold down Control, then add Alt to it. So keep holding Control, then add Alt, then add Shift, and then hit F7. So now this will enable a ton of additional menus to your BIOS that you can look into. So you still have the old menus, but then you're going to add a whole lot more information, as you'll see. I'll just go through these really quickly so you just get an idea of what is available to you if you're curious. Honestly, I don't know what a lot of these mean, so One thing that I might want to play with later on that might enable is under CPU configuration. If you come all the way down to the bottom, you'll see this legacy game compatibility mode. I might enable this. So this will allow you to use the scroll lock key to quickly park or disable the efficiency cores to disable and enable those. That might be useful to kind of play around with. You'll see later on when I'm doing a lot of benchmarking and testing that this laptop is definitely constrained by thermals and what this can do, especially in this thin and light kind of form factor. So you'll see that, and so maybe I'll do some testing later on with that.
And if you're curious, this is what it looks like during a BIOS update. Opening the laptop is pretty straightforward. First, you have to remove the 4 rubber feet. Thankfully, there is no adhesive or anything. They're just held on by friction. Just pry them off with your fingers, basically. Underneath that, there are 4 Phillips screws that have to be removed. Then it's just a matter of using a pry tool and just carefully popping all the clips all around the laptop. I started around the back right hinge and just worked my way around slowly and carefully until all the clips were popped, and then the back panel just pops right off. So here's a look at the motherboard. So first thing to note is, hey, did you know it's a 77 watt-hour battery? They really want you to know that. In the middle is the boot drive for the SSD, and on the right is the secondary drive. I replaced the secondary drive with a 4 terabyte Team Group SSD. And as a side note, it includes 2 times 1 terabyte Samsung drives. I removed the one on the right and took the original Samsung drive and stuck it in my PS5 Pro, and it worked just fine. Also worthy of note, the RAM is soldered to the motherboard and is not upgradable. So here are a few settings I like to do when setting up a new laptop. First, I turn off core isolation to help performance. I think it's worth the trade-off and the slightly decrease in security. Second thing, make sure VRR is turned on and optimized for windowed gaming. And third, I like to turn BitLocker off. I know it's a little less secure, but for what I'm using this laptop for, I don't think I need it. I prefer the slight increase in performance and just the ease of use in case something goes wrong with my boot drive and I need to swap it out. It's a little bit less headache. As far as pre-installed bloatware, it's not looking too bad. One thing I removed is LapLink PC Mover Professional since I don't need it. But the biggest offender is McAfee virus, so just get rid of that immediately. I hate that product. And just use the built-in Windows Defender. That usually is good enough as long as you practice safe computing. As far as keeping all your drivers up to date, there are 2 applications that I use. The first one is the LG Update app. And that one does a pretty good job of keeping all your drivers up to date, including critical applications like the built-in LG Smart Assistant, which is pretty important. The other one that I use, that I installed, is the Intel Driver and a Support Assistant. That one's pretty important to keep things like the Intel Arc graphics drivers up to date, because those are updated more frequently by Intel than it is by LG. So I went ahead and switched over to those instead of the LG ones. And also the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth drivers, I also went to the Intel ones instead. Mainly because if you're going to game on this, you want the latest graphics drivers possible, and LG pretty much lags behind quite a bit to the Intel ones. I'll include a link in the description. Next, let's look at some common productivity tasks. I edited the Atari 400 Mini YouTube short entirely on this laptop. It actually felt pretty good doing it. The large 17-inch screen made it less painful than most laptops, and the overall experience went pretty smoothly. Granted, this was a pretty simple video project that didn't have a whole lot of effects or lots of simultaneous video tracks. Also compiled my work code, which is a pretty large Vue.js Quasar frontend and a C#.NET Docker backend, and that also worked quite well thanks to the 32 gigabytes of memory. All the video was captured using OBS, also running on this laptop. I also tested Handbrake and hardware video encoding using Intel QuickSync Video. I'm happy to report it is fully supported. I converted an iPhone video shot in 1080p, 60 FPS, H.264 to AV1. It converted it at 670 FPS. I also converted to H.265 at 696 FPS. For battery testing, I decided to set up a couple of common power profiles and then loop YouTube playing Tears of Steel at 1080p in full screen until the battery drained 10%. I used the paid version of HWinfo64 to monitor the battery life and to sound an alarm when specific battery percentage threshold was reached. I used a stopwatch to time how long it took to drain 10% and then multiply that by 10 to get a rough estimate of total battery life. So the first scenario I tested was a very low power scenario. I'm trying to stretch the battery life as long as possible. So I had it at 50% brightness, the refresh rate of the monitor set at 60 Hertz, the cooling fan set to low, and the volume of the speaker set to 20. So here the battery drained in 56 minutes to 10%. So if you multiply that out, it works out to be about 9 hours and 19 minutes of runtime, which is surprisingly very long, at least for this specific use case. The next profile that I tested at is what I called a pretty typical balanced scenario, which is balanced power mode, 70% screen brightness, running the screen at 144 Hertz, normal cooling fan speed, and the volume also set at 20. Here I did 2 runs and they were very consistent. Both times it took about 15 minutes to drain the battery to 10%, which equates to around 8 hours and roughly 30 minutes, which is really good. So for the final YouTube test, I ran it again at balance, but I took the screen brightness up to maximum, and this dropped our runtime down to 6 hours and 30 minutes. This tells you how much the screen actually affects battery usage. With 17 inches, I guess that makes a lot of sense. I also tested Moonlight Sunshine game streaming, and this surprised me a little bit. I thought it would do a bit better. I'm not sure why I only got about 4 to 3.5 hours of battery life out of it, but it could be because the bit rate is pretty high. Maybe it's the H.265 decoding, maybe it's the Bluetooth controller and additional radio power drainage, but either way, you get about 3.5 to 4 hours. And here I also ran Cyberpunk on battery and potato settings, trying to get it to get as many frames per second as possible. And here you expect about 1 hour and 40 minutes of play before your battery will die. Also ran a similar test on my MacBook Air M2, which I ran the same YouTube video on loop at 100% brightness and max volume, and it drained in 39 minutes, which gives us a runtime of approximately 6 hours and 30 minutes, which surprisingly matches pretty closely to the balance mode max brightness on the Gram. So actually the battery life on the Gram matches pretty close to a MacBook Air. But you got to realize the MacBook Air is only a 13-inch screen, and on the Gram we're powering a 17-inch screen. Of course, it's a much bigger battery too. And finally, it's interesting to note it took about 13 minutes to charge 10% of the battery. Of course, it's not linear. It takes longer to charge the last few percentage of a battery, but it's still interesting to note. FYI, this is where I changed my power mode and also the cooling mode. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty benchmarks, I wanted to show you how the cores are laid out. To figure this out, I used ADA64 and then laid over the task manager and the performance tab. And so the way I figured this out is I just ran some tasks and see how the loads were and compared it to basically ADA64. It's basically in the exact same order. So if you look at it, you can see that the way it's arranged is a little bit odd. The first two graphs are actually, or the first two graphs are just a hyper-threaded P core. So it's just one P core. Then the next part of the graphs, the next 8, are your efficiency cores, your E cores, and then followed up by that is the next 5 P cores, and then the last 2 on the graph are your low-powered cores, the L cores. So it's a little weird how it's laid out. Here are the Geekbench AI 1.1.0 results if you're curious. First up, we have the Cinebench 2024 scores. And you're going to see they're not going to perform nearly as well as other ultra-core i7 155H benchmarks that you'll see posted. I think we're mainly here thermal throttled. You're not going to be able to get as much wattage into these CPUs just because of this chassis and this thin form factor, this light form factor, just not going to have as much cooling. I know in this year's model they upgraded even with integrated graphics with 2 cooling fans. It's still not enough to allow you to really let the CPU fully stretch its wings and get all the power and performance out of it, but that's just one of those trade-offs you have to live with. Also, I tested on battery and also on AC power. There's really not a whole lot of difference, so you're going to get the maximum performance regardless if you're on battery or not. The fans were on high during the performance profile runs. Here's an example of how loud the fans are under full load and the fan speeds on high. It's really not that bad. Here are the 3D Mark scores. A few things to note. I did test against a 100-watt PD charger, my NECTEC, against the LG 65-watt charger. There's not really much difference. You'll see some variances from run to run. I think that's mainly because of thermals again. We're hitting thermal limits and the CPU is throttling, and depending on just the cooling at the moment, sometimes it runs a bit better, sometimes it runs a bit worse. Again, on battery, there's really not much difference between running on wall power versus battery, so there's really no difference there. So just to show you a little bit more on what is going on with power caps, I'm going to demonstrate using Cyberpunk to put on a heavy CPU and GPU load. The Core Ultra 7 155H CPU is a 115 watt part. The LG gram is basically capping the amount of power the CPU would draw to around 30 watts. I measure around 60 watts total from the wall. It doesn't matter if I'm using the included 65 watt PD charger shown in the upper left, a 100 watt PD charger in the upper right, or on battery power in the lower left. The power and performance across the board is the same and is capped out across the board under heavy CPU and GPU load. Even with the upgraded 2-fan design this year with the integrated only graphics, you can see the cooling solution implemented CPU temps can still hit over 90 degrees, and this is with fan speed set to high. No wonder they are so severely limiting CPU power. This is one of the pretty big trade-offs you're making to have such a incredibly thin and light laptop in this form factor. It does bother me, though, that I'm paying for a lot more performance that I can never unlock due to these constraints. Welcome to my integrated Intel Arc graphics torture test, where I benchmark 18 modern AAA games to see what it can run and what is actually playable. I always favor frame rate, so I'll be going for the most potato of potato settings by lowering resolution and quality settings where possible. I'll be using XES's ultra performance upscaling, lower resolution, frame generation, and every trick in the book to see what this GPU can do. All games tested are in performance mode with high fan settings.
My name is Chucky, and my king will understand my need for service. They will help you only
So there's currently a bug with Cyberpunk where you can't use FSR3 and full screen. It just full screen mode disappears when you use FSR3 frame generation. And instead you use the lossless frame generation app and it works quite well. It looks quite a bit better and you get frame generation too, and you get over 60 frames per second and it actually plays quite well.
Haka can help you after we save him. Hard to believe I might see him soon.
He's lucky to have you.
You might disagree.
That's what siblings are for.
What about you? Any brothers or sisters?
Lord Shimura is my only family.
What will you do when he's free?
Take a breath. Because then I'll know there's hope for our island.
You feel that strongly?
I've watched him win victory against impossible odds. And after your brother is free, what then?
Honestly, I haven't had time to think about it.
I'll be thinking of a name for your beast.
I like it! Atreus, to me!
Okay, coming.
You left me to fight alone.
I did.
People are one thing. Everything else you fight. Until I say stop or we are dead. Understand? Pull your weight or we go home.
I understand.
Good.
Wait, they're back here again.
Objective nearby. ETA T-minus 1 minute 30 seconds. ETA T-minus 1 minute. ETA T-minus 30 seconds. ETA T-minus 20 seconds. ETA T-minus 10 seconds. Clear landing zone. Pelican 1 approaching pickup. This is Pelican 1 preparing for touchdown. Extraction complete. Pelican 1 beginning ascent.
Even with frame gen, this game is unplayable and it looks horrible. I couldn't get FSR3 frame generation to work.
Yes, folks, we have a momentous day in store for you. Starting with me. And ending with a surprise gift from Clank to Ratchet.
Oh dear. Must he tell the entire galaxy? Wait, a gift? For what? Oh, you will see. It is awaiting us at the front of the parade route. Well, we better get moving then. I hope this is not about your gift. Hurry, we must get to the front of the parade route. Oh dear. Activating Magna Boots! There, we can glide over. I see more of those goons down there. We better get moving before anyone gets hurt.
likely she's in this village.
Our intel was correct then. Well done.
Need a location on a nearby lake. She may have been taken there.
Copy that. I'll see what I can find.
Hurry up. Something's happened to people here. My escorts are. Let it go. Talk later. Let myself out.
As a side note, you can get FSR3 frame gen working if you turn the overlay off, but I didn't record it that way.
Unbelievable. But Venom's totally Texas. Yeah, Yankee's right. Venom's a good name.
We'll hold him here. Everyone else, get upstairs!
Haven't seen you guys before. Smash glow sticks.
Don't need no weapons work.
What are these weapons? Memory metal? More of them up on the balcony.
We don't leave.
For Wi-Fi testing, I used iPerf3. The server is running on Linux on Gigabit Ethernet. My wireless access point is Ubiquiti U7 Pro Max. For internet, I have AT&T Fiber with 1 gigabit up and down. The laptop is in the same room as the access point and about 20 feet away. Even though the Wi-Fi 6E speeds are very good, Intel Wi-Fi cards are known to do background scans even if you are already connected. This can cause lag spikes, which are very noticeable if you are game streaming, like when using Moonlight or Geforce Now. There are a couple of solutions I found on Reddit that seem to work. The first one just requires the command line and is temporary. I have an example command file that you can modify with your interface if it is different. The first command on the left is what you have to enter to find your Wi-Fi interface name. The second method is a bit more complex and requires adding several registry entries. Please proceed with caution, and I take no responsibility if you mess up your machine by doing this. Both seem to work, but I find the command file to work fine if you just remember to start it before you start game streaming. Just remember to run it in administrative mode. Now we've come to my number one reason why I bought this laptop in the first place. I probably use this laptop for Sunshine to Moonlight game streaming over 75% of the time. I did input lag testing the same way as I did in my previous input lag video. I shot video in slow motion at 240 FPS and then counted frames between a button press and when I see change on the screen. It's not perfect by any means, but it gives me a rough idea. Go watch that video if you would want a more in-depth explanation. So I did my standard Destiny 2 test, but this time I upped the resolution to the native display of 1600p and refresh rate of 144 FPS. This requires 67 megabits per second of bandwidth to stream. At this increased frame rate, we get a very respectable 66.7 milliseconds total input lag. I also tested Chiaki, and as usual, PlayStation streaming isn't nearly as good as Moonlight, though it does improve at 120 FPS. Unfortunately, not very many PS5 games support 120 FPS. Even the unlocked ones rarely hit that high of a frame rate. So there are a few interesting findings in the numbers. Frame render time makes up a good chunk of the total time, so increasing the frame rate is a huge factor. And having a display that can support high frame rates is important. 144 FPS Moonlight on the gram beats native console performance at 60 FPS and comes pretty close to 100 FPS local on the PS5. 120 FPS Chiaki gets close to 60 FPS local on the PS5. So I'll finish out the game streaming section of this video with some Moonlight examples, then GeForce Now, Xbox Cloud streaming, and some PS5 Pro streaming over Chiaki-ng, which has come a long way. Star Wars Outlaws was one of the few games I couldn't get to run locally. It would just crash the desktop every time I tried to load my game. But it runs great over Moonlight streaming. Also, don't believe the reviews. It's a very good game. It's not a great game, but it's a good game.
Let's do this!
Look who it is!
Hi, everyone.
Could I get another cup of that delicious special brew that only you know how to make?
Of course. Who else wants a top up?
Me.
Right here, please.
One for me, please, and thank you.
Will do. Let me just grab a fresh pot.
The pie here is to die
Here's your
for.
coffee.
How do you juggle running this diner, your bird sanctuary, and that amazing fan site for the writer you love so much?
I work extremely hard, but also I'm naturally talented.
Well, heck, no wonder us regular folks can't keep up. I'll never be a success.
Fight. I will end you. Round 2.
So Chiaki for deck has been renamed to Chiaki-ng, which just stands for next generation. It should just be used for basically everything now because it's not just for Steam Deck, and it's the properly maintained version of Chiaki because the original project is no longer maintained. And so one of the cool new features that does support is if you have one of the newer Xbox controllers with the share button, you can remap that for the touchpad. So I just want to show you how you do that real quick because it's a little confusing. So first you click on the gear icon, then you go over, which is settings, and you go over to controllers tab and click on change controller mapping. And then at this point, you just want to touch any button on the controller to tell the program that this is the controller you want to remap. And here you want to click on or touch a button that is not the share button, the share button doesn't work. So do something like left bumper. It doesn't really matter. Now you're into the part where you can remap the buttons. And so you just want to click on the touchpad, and now you touch the or click on the share button. And after that, you want to make sure you click in the upper right corner, update controller mapping. That saves it, and then you're done. So the first accessory I want to talk about is this magnetic right-angle USB-C adapter. It basically turns your laptop into almost a MagSafe charger. So I really find this useful and makes it real convenient to charge your laptop. And that runs $16 for a 2-pack. The next accessory I use every day is a lap desk by Lapgear. I use the 15.6-inch one because it doesn't quite fit. Actually, it's a little bit too small. It does hang off the end a little bit, as you see, but for the most part, it fits fine. I find the weight and size to be fine. They do sell a 17.3-inch one, which I did pick up. I find it quite a bit heavier and quite a bit bulkier. I mean, it's like way oversized. I don't know why they made the 17-inch this large. I wish they made it actually closer to the size of an actual 17-inch laptop. But they made this thing like gigantic for some reason, and it weighs really heavy too. So I honestly do not recommend the 17.3-inch. Go with the 15.6-inch, and it's fine. It's just a little bit too small, but it works. And that runs $18. Of course, you're gonna need a controller. So I just used the standard Xbox Series XS controller. The share button, of course, is really handy, so you can map that to things like the touchpad for Chiaki when you're streaming PS5 games. Also, since this laptop does not have a built-in Ethernet port like this one by TP-Link, it's only $15, and it's USB-C to gigabit Ethernet. And I like how the cable tucks over, so it's really compact. It's always good to have a travel mouse. I don't really use it too much because I haven't really traveled a whole lot with this laptop. But when I do, this mouse is still my favorite. It's the Razer Orochi V2. It's currently really cheap. It's only $40 at Walmart. I'll leave a link in the description. It uses one AA, and it connects either through USB or through a dongle. So it's your choice. The dongle has a nice compartment here where you can store it. And then you can just choose here between off is in the middle, and then it's Bluetooth to the right, and then to the left is using the dongle. And if you want to travel really light, maybe you want to use something like an Amazon Basic 17-inch laptop sleeve. And of course, I always recommend these Nectec GAN chargers. This is the 100-watt PD charger. It is not, well, it is a little bit bigger than the included LG Gram one, but it's 100 watt versus the 65 watt that's included. It also has a couple extra ports, so you have a secondary USB-C and a USB-A port. So I always carry one of these extra ones around, just a little bit more flexibility, a few extra ports, but it is a little bit heavier, it's a little bit bulkier, but they're also very cheap, only $29. So for a laptop review, this has gone way longer than I originally planned, but I feel like I need to thoroughly explore what the LG Gram is and isn't, and why does this thing even exist and who is it for? So let me start by answering the question why I specifically bought it, especially as a gamer who already owns so many portable gaming devices like the Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, and even a Lenovo Legion Pro with a 3070, which is still running great. I'm getting up there in years, and as much as I love portable handhelds and even retro handhelds like my RG35XX SP, my eyes aren't what they used to be. I really can't see small text very well, and I find it difficult to play even for short periods of time without resorting to using reading glasses. So this is where the LG Gram fits in. It has this bright big 17-inch screen where I can see and read things comfortably in an incredibly lightweight package that sits comfortably on my lap for hours without issue and has solid performance all around for good streaming. The Legion laptop is a workhorse, but at 5.5 pounds it gets uncomfortable on the lap after an hour or two of use. It's just too heavy, so I was looking for something even bigger and lighter, and there are very few options that fit the bill. As far as traveling with it, it is super light to pack, but it is rather large to use in more cramped spaces. So I wouldn't want to take it out and say use it on a plane or on the passenger seat of a car. So if you plan to pack it and use it at your destination, that's great. Otherwise, I would rather bring something smaller like my 13-inch MacBook Air M2. Most of the time, I'm using the Gram in the house on the couch. I've had this laptop for over 5 months now, and I use it almost every day either for some surfing, a little developing, or video editing, but mostly for Moonlight game streaming. So let me summarize some of my likes and dislikes. First, the likes. Gone are the days of 17-inch laptops that weigh 6 pounds or more. Who knew you can get 17 inches in something less than 2.5 pounds? It really is amazing. I'm still surprised to this day how light it feels every time I pick it up. And even though I mentioned it doesn't feel all that premium, it still is pretty sturdy for what it is. It is crazy light and crazy thin. I cannot stress that enough. There is nothing else in the market like this. The display. For an IPS display, it checks all the boxes. 144Hz, VRR, bright, 17 inches, 2560 by 1600, 16 by 10. Ports. It's got plenty of them. Full-size HDMI, 2 times Thunderbolt 4 that support charging, 2 USB 3 ports. Has a mostly centered touchpad, good battery life, especially in some scenarios, and it's easy to open and the storage is upgradable. So here are my dislikes. The RAM is soldered to the motherboard. The power and thermal constraints. I feel like I paid for all this compute and half of it is wasted. I understand the reason for the trade-off. I wouldn't even mind if they made it a bit thicker, but maybe somehow kept the weight down. Maybe come up with a more advanced thermal solution. Maybe use more heat pipes or liquid metal and squeeze even more performance out of this platform. They also use Intel's CPU. This is my first experience with Intel Arc graphics, and I have to say I was actually pretty impressed after using AMD APUs for the last few years in PC handhelds. Most games ran pretty well. Still, AMD is still quite a bit more mature in this space, but I really hope Intel continues to compete. Competition is always good. I would love to see LG Gram based on Strix's point. Instead, I'm sure we'll get another Lunar Lake refresh. Battery life could still be even better. And after about 4 months of use, I started to run into some odd cold boot issues where the Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or sound wouldn't work unless I forced reboot. Turning off fast startup seemed to fix the issue. And finally, we have price. If the Costco deal had the 144Hz VRR panel instead of the 60Hz touch panel, I think that would be a solid value. I personally don't think it's worth the trade-off. At the current price of $1,700 direct from LG, that is a tougher call. It's basically around the same price I paid at launch if you include the free monitor I got. You might be better off waiting for the Lunar Lake models if you don't need it right now, or you can't find a bigger discount. This is what happens when there is no real competition for this specific kind of product. You can charge a premium price. So 5 months later, do I have any regrets getting the LG Gram? I would say no. It really did meet the exact needs I was looking for, which is a gamer looking for a big laptop that is very light, that isn't really designed for local gaming, but excels at game streaming. I guess that's pretty niche. Well, hopefully I've answered some questions and helped you decide if this laptop meets your specific niche and if it's worth getting. It definitely has its compromises, but it just depends if it is in ways that is important to you or not. For me, it nailed all the critical things I cared about, though not to say it can't be improved.